Dr. Nari Park stared at the computer screen in disbelief. The signals had been coming for 3 days now, and each time she decoded another section, her hand shook more. This was not some random space noise or satellite error. This was a real message from somewhere beyond Earth's solar system. The Seoul Institute for Xenological Studies was quiet at this late hour. Most researchers had gone home, but Nari could not leave. The message was too important. She had spent years studying theoretical alien languages, but she never thought she would actually need to use that knowledge. The translation software finally finished its work. Nari read the words that appeared on her screen and her heart stopped. It was not a greeting or an invitation to peace. It was a cry for help. To the death world called Terra, the message began. We are the Altanian Confederation. Our worlds are dying. 2 great evils destroy everything we have built. The hegemony empire burns our cities. The collective mind takes our people and makes them slaves. We have heard legends of your kind. The star charts speak of monsters who never surrender. Please, if you can hear this, help us. We are sending our last ambassador to find you. Nari picked up her phone with trembling fingers. She called her supervisor, then the government contact numbers she had memorized but never expected to use. Within hours, the building was full of people in dark suits and military uniforms. Captain Han-Sol Kim arrived with the morning sun. He was a tall man with scars on his hands and tired eyes that had seen too much combat. The government had called him from his retirement to lead what they were calling First Contact Protocol. Han-Sol had spent 20 years in special forces, fighting in places that did not exist on any official map. Show me the message, Han-Sol said. His voice was calm, but Nari could see the tension in his shoulders. She played the recording for him. The alien voice was strange, like singing mixed with static, but the translation was clear enough. They think we are monsters, Han-Sol said after listening twice. The legends they mention, Nari explained. I think they come from old probe data. Centuries ago, other aliens might have watched us from far away. They saw our wars, our ability to survive in extreme places. To peaceful species, we would look like killers. A new officer entered the room. Commander Woo Jin Lee was younger than Han-Sol but carried himself like a veteran. He had studied alien technology theories at the military academy, another person preparing for a day that might never come. Captain, Woo Jin said, we have a situation. Long-range sensors picked up something entering our solar system. It is moving too fast to be natural, and it is headed straight for Earth. The object turned out to be a small spacecraft, badly damaged and leaking atmosphere. It crashed in the Pacific Ocean, and recovery teams pulled it from the water within hours. Inside was something that changed everything. Ambassador Veltar was nothing like the aliens in Earth's movies. He was tall and thin, with 4 arms and skin that changed color based on his emotions. He was dying when they found him, and it took 3 days of emergency surgery to keep him alive. When Veltar finally woke up in the medical facility, his skin shifted to deep blue, which the translator said meant fear. He spoke in a voice like wind chimes, and the computer worked to turn his words into something humans could understand. You are the Terra monsters, he whispered. I found you. The death world exists. Dr. Nari Park spent hours with Veltar, learning about his people and their desperate situation. The Altanians were herbivores who had never known war until the galaxy brought war to them. They lived on peaceful worlds where the worst conflict was a debate about farming techniques. We tried to fight, Veltar explained, his skin turning gray with sadness. But we do not know how. The hegemony empire has weapons that turn our cities to glass. Their soldiers are trained from birth to kill. The collective mind is worse. They take our people and make them into drones. We lose our families, our friends, our children. Why come to us? Nari asked. What made you think Earth could help? Veltar's skin flickered with colors that had no translation. The star charts. Ancient records from traitor species. They speak of a world where the inhabitants fight each other constantly, where the environment itself tries to kill everything that lives, where the people never surrender, even when death is certain. We thought these were myths until our situation became hopeless. Captain Han-Sol listened to these conversations from the observation room. He was building a team, knowing that Earth's response would define humanity's future relationship with the galaxy. He chose people he had worked with before, soldiers who could adapt to impossible situations. Engineer So-Young Choi was the first person he called. She had designed equipment for missions in hostile environments. She had studied alien technology theories at the military academy, another person preparing for a day that might never come. Captain Han-Sol listened to these conversations from the observation room. He was building a team, knowing that Earth's response would define humanity's future relationship with the galaxy. He chose people he had worked with before, soldiers who could adapt to impossible situations. Engineer So-Young Choi was the first person he called. creating technology that could work in conditions that would kill most machines. If they were going to fight aliens, they would need her innovations. Pilot Dong Hyun Yoon was the second choice. He flew aircraft in ways that violated safety regulations and common sense, but he never lost a mission. His ability to think in 3 dimensions while under fire would be crucial if they encountered alien spacecraft. The world's governments met in emergency sessions. Some wanted to ignore the alien request, afraid that getting involved would bring trouble to Earth. Others saw an opportunity to establish humanity as a galactic power. The military leaders were more practical. If these aliens had found Earth, others would follow eventually. Better to meet potential enemies on someone else's territory. The decision came down to a simple question. Could humanity live with itself if it refused to help dying civilizations? The answer was no. Construction began on Earth's first faster-than-light spacecraft. The design combined human engineering with alien technology recovered from Veltar's ship. The work went faster than anyone expected, as if human minds understood the technology instinctively. They called the ship the Soul Hammer, honoring the city where first contact had been made. It was built to carry 50 soldiers and their equipment across the galaxy. Every nation contributed their best people, but Han Solo had final approval on all selections. 6 months after receiving the first alien message, the Soul Hammer was ready for launch. Han Solo stood in the command center looking at his crew. They were all volunteers, all aware they might never see Earth again. "We go to help people who call us monsters," he told them. "Maybe they are right about what we are, but if being monsters is what it takes to stop evil, then we will be the best monsters the galaxy has ever seen." The ship lifted off from Earth's surface and engaged its faster-than-light drive. Behind them, the planet grew smaller until it was just another star in the darkness. Ahead lay unknown worlds, alien civilizations, and a war that would decide the fate of the galaxy. None of them knew that their journey would make humanity the most feared and respected species in the known universe. They only knew that someone had asked for help, and Earth's children were answering the call. The Soul Hammer dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Altanian space. The journey had taken 2 weeks, but the crew felt like they had been traveling for months. Space looked different here, with strange colored stars and nebulas that did not exist near Earth. Captain Hansol Kim stood on the bridge, watching alien space traffic move through the system. The Altanian ships were beautiful, made of materials that looked like grown crystal rather than built metal. They moved slowly and gracefully, clearly designed by people who had never needed to dodge weapons fire. "Captain," Commander Wu Jin Lee said from his station, "we are receiving multiple communications. The Altanians know we are here." A new voice came through the ship's speakers, speaking in the musical language they had learned during the journey. The translation system turned the words into something humans could understand. "Terra vessel, this is High Chancellor Morden of the Altanian Council. We welcome you to our space, though we admit confusion about your size and numbers. Our legend spoke of great warships filled with thousands of warriors." Hansol activated the communication system. "High Chancellor, this is Captain Hansol Kim representing Earth. We brought 50 soldiers. In our experience, that is enough." The silence that followed lasted almost a full minute. When Morden spoke again, his voice carried doubt and worry. 50 warriors to fight 2 galactic empires? Captain Kim, perhaps you do not understand the scale of our enemies. The hegemony controls hundreds of star systems. The collective mind has assimilated entire species. "We understand," Hansol replied. "Send us the tactical information about your enemies. We will review their capabilities and develop appropriate responses." Dr. Nari Park stood beside the captain, listening to the exchange. She had studied alien psychology during the journey, but actually talking to another species was different from reading theoretical texts. The Altanians sounded genuinely confused by human confidence. The Soul Hammer was guided to the Altanian homeworld, a planet covered in cities that looked like gardens. The buildings grew from the ground like trees, and waterways connected every district. It was beautiful and peaceful, and Hansol immediately understood why these people could not fight a war. High Chancellor Morden met them at the spaceport. He was taller than Ambassador Veltar, with skin that shifted through calm blue and green colors. His forearms moved in gestures that seemed to be part of his speech, and his eyes held the kindness of someone who had never killed anything. "Your people are smaller than our legend suggested. Morden said, studying the human delegation. Are you certain these are your warriors? Han Sol was dressed in standard military gear, armed with weapons that looked primitive compared to the energy devices the Altanians carried. Wu Jin and the other officers looked like exactly what they were, professional soldiers from a world that had never known lasting peace. These are our warriors, Han Sol confirmed. Show us your enemy. The Altanians led the humans to their command center, a building that hummed with peaceful energy. The walls displayed tactical information about the war, but it was organized like a scientific study rather than a battle plan. The Altanians had detailed information about their enemies but no idea how to use it effectively. The Hegemony Empire, Morden explained, gesturing to a display showing red-marked star systems. They believe that strength gives them the right to rule. Their soldiers are genetically enhanced, trained from childhood to follow orders without question. They fight in perfect formations using overwhelming firepower to destroy anything that resists. Dr. Nari Park studied the tactical data, taking notes on her portable computer. The hegemony forces were impressive by any measure. Their ships were massive, their weapons could destroy planets, and their discipline was absolute. But she could see patterns that human military minds would find familiar. They fight like machines, she observed. Predictable patterns, inflexible command structure. Our ancestors dealt with enemies like this before. Wu Jin was already analyzing the hegemony battle footage, watching their ship movements and attack formations. They expect their enemies to fight with honor, he said. They use predetermined strategies based on established military doctrine. But what happens when their enemies ignore all the rules? Morden's skin shifted to confused yellow. Ignore the rules? There are galactic conventions about warfare. Civilized species follow protocols that limit destruction and preserve life. We are not a civilized species, Han Sol said quietly. Show us the other enemy. The second display showed something that made even the experienced human soldiers uncomfortable. The collective mind was not an empire but a single organism spread across multiple star systems. They consumed other species, turning individuals into drones that served the hive consciousness. They cannot be negotiated with, Morden explained. The collective mind sees all other life as resources to be absorbed. They take our people and erase their individuality. Families are separated, children lose their parents, and everyone becomes part of the hive. Engineer So-Young Choi examined the technical data about collective mind biotechnology. They use biological integration to control their drones, she said. But the process requires the target to be mentally compatible with the hive structure. What happens if they try to integrate minds that are incompatible? We do not know, Morden admitted. No species has ever resisted integration successfully. Pilot Dong Hyun Yoon was studying the enemy ship designs when alarms began sounding throughout the Altanian command center. The peaceful blue lighting changed to warning red, and voices spoke urgently in the musical Altanian language. Hegemony scout ships have entered the system, an Altanian officer reported. 3 vessels moving toward the capital. They will arrive in 20 minutes. The Altanians began organizing their response with the same careful deliberation they used for everything else. Ships would be launched in defensive formations, diplomatic channels would be opened to negotiate, and civilian populations would be moved to secure locations. No, Han Sol said firmly. Donghyun, can you fly one of their ships? The pilot studied the Altanian craft through the command center windows. Different controls, but the principles should be the same. Give me 5 minutes to learn the interface. Captain, Morden protested, our ships are not designed for aggressive action. They are exploration vessels, not fighters. Everything is a weapon if you use it correctly, Donghyun said, already moving toward the spaceport. I need 2 volunteers to help with the ship systems. So Young followed him, grabbing a toolkit. I can adapt their technology for combat use. Give me access to their power systems and I can make improvements. Morden's skin turned pale with shock. You cannot modify our ships without months of safety testing. The power systems are delicate, precisely calibrated. Precision is for people who have time, So Young replied. We have 20 minutes. 15 minutes later, Donghyun launched an Altanian exploration ship that no longer looked or moved like it was designed for peaceful purposes. So Young had rerouted power systems, increased engine output beyond safe limits, and installed human weapons that the ship's computer insisted could not possibly work. The hegemony scouts arrived in perfect formation, 3 identical ships moving in a pattern that had been successful for centuries. They expected to face Altanian vessels that would try to negotiate or retreat in orderly fashion. Instead, they encountered something that violated every principle of civilized spaceflight. Donghyun's ship moved in ways that should have destroyed it, accelerating and turning at speeds that no organic pilot should have been able to survive. It ignored all communication attempts and attacked without warning. The first hegemony ship was rammed directly through its command section before its crew could react. The second was destroyed by weapons fire that came from impossible angles. The third ship tried to retreat, but Donghyun pursued it beyond the system's edge, harassing it until it fled in disorder. When Donghyun returned to the Altanian homeworld, the spaceport was silent. Morden and his people stared at the modified ship, unable to process what they had witnessed. "You destroyed 3 hegemony scouts with a single exploration vessel," Morden said slowly. "This should not be possible." "Your ships are better than you think," Donghyun replied, climbing out of the pilot's seat. "You just use them too carefully." Dr. Nari Park watched the Altanians try to understand what had happened. Their entire worldview was built on careful planning, safety protocols, and civilized behavior. The idea that controlled violence could be a tool for protecting peace was foreign to them. "The galaxy is about to learn something new," she told Han Sol quietly. "They asked for monsters, and we are going to show them what that really means." Han Sol nodded, studying the tactical displays that showed hegemony and collective mind forces throughout the sector. "Send a message to Earth. Tell them the mission is proceeding as planned. And request additional personnel. I think we are going to need more monsters." News of the hegemony scout destruction spread across the galaxy, faster than the human team expected. Within days, communication networks carried stories about mysterious warriors from a death world who fought without honor or mercy. Some species dismissed the reports as propaganda, but others began asking questions about this new player in galactic politics. General Korth of the Hegemony Empire received the reports while planning the final assault on Altanian space. He was a veteran of 100 conquered worlds, a soldier who had never known defeat. The idea that primitive aliens could threaten his forces was insulting. 3 scouts, he told his staff officers, destroyed by lucky savages who probably sacrificed their own ships to achieve surprise. "We will show these Terra monsters what real warfare looks like." But the collective mind had a different reaction. The hive consciousness studied the battle data with growing concern. These new aliens moved in ways that suggested minds unlike anything the collective had encountered. Their thoughts would be chaotic, unpredictable, possibly resistant to integration. This required investigation. Captain Han Sol Kim was developing what he called the Death World Doctrine in the Altanian Command Center. High Chancellor Morden watched with fascination and horror as human tactical thinking was applied to galactic warfare. "Your enemies think like we used to think," Han Sol explained, pointing to battle maps. "They follow rules, use established tactics, fight with predictable patterns. The hegemony expects their opponents to meet them in open battle. The collective mind assumes other species will react to assimilation attempts with fear and confusion." "But these are logical approaches," Morden protested. "Military doctrine exists for good reasons. Chaos leads to unnecessary casualties." Commander Wu Jin Lee looked up from his planning tablet. "Chaos is a weapon when you know how to use it. The enemy cannot predict what they cannot understand." The first test of the Death World doctrine came when hegemony forces attacked the mining world of Kepler 442b. The planet was rich in rare metals that both sides needed, but its environment was extremely hostile. The surface was covered with active volcanoes, the atmosphere was toxic, and radiation levels would kill most galactic species within hours. The hegemony plan was straightforward: establish orbital control, deploy automated mining equipment, and defend the operation from a safe distance. They expected the Altanians to either retreat or attempt a conventional assault that could be easily repelled. Instead, they found human soldiers already on the planet's surface. Wu Jin had led a strike team through the volcano fields, using the hostile environment as cover. His soldiers wore environmental suits that engineer So Young Choi had modified to not just survive the planet's conditions, but to use them as advantages. The suits processed toxic gases into breathing air and converted radiation into power for their weapons. "How did they get through our orbital defenses?" the hegemony commander demanded, watching his mining operation disappear in volcanic explosions. "Sir," his tactical officer replied. They approached through the planet's magnetic storm systems. No civilized species would attempt travel through those fields. The radiation should have killed them. Should have, the commander repeated, but did not. The hegemony forces tried to respond with orbital bombardment, but the humans had positioned themselves in locations where heavy weapons could not target them, without triggering volcanic eruptions that would destroy the mining equipment. It was a strategy that required precise timing, detailed environmental knowledge, and complete willingness to fight in conditions that most species considered impossible. The mining operation was destroyed within 6 hours. The hegemony forces retreated, leaving behind equipment worth more than some star systems' entire economies. More importantly, they left behind questions about what kind of species could fight effectively in environments that should have been instantly lethal. Dr. Nari Park found herself documenting human tactics for the horrified Altanian observers. Her reports were meant to help their allies understand human capabilities, but they spread throughout the galactic communication networks and became something like war correspondences from hell. Human soldiers, she wrote, do not merely survive hostile environments. They adapt to use those environments as weapons. They fight in vacuum without life support, using magnetic fields to maneuver. They operate in toxic atmospheres that would dissolve the breathing apparatus of other species. They seem to consider radiation, extreme temperatures, and corrosive chemicals to be minor inconveniences rather than deadly threats. Engineer So Young Choi was working around the clock to modify human equipment for galactic warfare. Her innovations impressed and terrified the Altanian scientists who tried to understand her methods. Your safety protocols, she explained to a group of Altanian engineers, assume that dangerous conditions should be avoided. Human safety protocols assume that dangerous conditions are normal and plan. Accordingly, she demonstrated by showing them a modified breathing system that could process the atmosphere of a dozen different hostile worlds. Your masks protect you from poison gases. Our masks convert poison gases into useful chemicals. But the energy requirements, one Altanian engineer protested. Such conversions would require power sources that could explode if damaged. Controlled explosions, So Young corrected. We use the explosion risk as a secondary weapon system. The Altanian engineers stared at her in silence. The concept of deliberately designing equipment to be dangerous to the user was beyond their understanding. Pilot Dong-Hyun Yoon was training Altanian pilots in human flight techniques, with limited success. The problem was not technical skill but psychological conditioning. Altanians had been bred for thousands of generations to avoid unnecessary risks. You pull back when the ship starts shaking, Dong-Hyun explained after another failed training exercise. But that shaking means you are at the edge of the ship's performance envelope. That is where combat happens. But if we push beyond the safe limits, the Altanian pilot replied, the ship could be destroyed. Yes, Dong-Hyun agreed, but if you do not push beyond the safe limits, you will definitely be destroyed by enemies who are not worried about safe limits. The first collective mind contact attempt occurred during what should have been a routine patrol mission. A human scouting team encountered a collective mind probe ship near the edge of Altanian space. The probe was designed to capture enemy personnel for integration into the hive consciousness. The probe's biological systems attempted to establish mental contact with the human patrol leader, expecting to find a mind that could be easily overwhelmed and absorbed. Instead, the probe encountered Sergeant Park Min-ho, a veteran of Earth's Special Forces who had been trained to resist psychological interrogation. The result was unlike anything in the collective mind's experience. Min-ho's mind did not submit to integration. Instead, his chaotic human thought patterns created feedback loops in the probe's consciousness. The probe's attempt to absorb one human mind resulted in the breakdown of its own mental stability. The probe ship began broadcasting distress signals as its biological systems failed. Other collective mind vessels responded, but they found only wreckage and confused reports from surviving drones who claimed to have experienced individual thoughts for the first time in their existence. The incident was reported throughout the collective mind network, creating the first documented case of a species that could not only resist assimilation but could actually damage the hive consciousness through mental contact. Captain Han Sol received reports of these encounters while planning the defense of the Altanian homeworld. Intelligence suggested that both enemy forces were preparing major assaults, hoping to destroy the human threat before it could spread further. "They are going to come at us with everything they have," he told his assembled team. "The hegemony will use overwhelming firepower to prove their superiority. The collective mind will try to assimilate our people to understand our capabilities." "And our response?" Wu Jin asked. "We show them why legends call us monsters," Han Sol replied. "We fight like humans. No rules, no mercy, no surrender. We use every advantage our death world evolution gave us." Dr. Nari Park looked up from her communication equipment. "Captain, I am receiving messages from other species throughout the galaxy. Some are asking for protection from the hegemony and collective mind. Others are asking whether humans pose a threat to peaceful civilizations." "Both questions have the same answer," Han Sol said. "We are exactly as dangerous as we need to be. The battle for the Altanian homeworld would determine whether humanity became the galaxy's protector or its greatest nightmare." As enemy fleets gathered in nearby systems, the human team prepared to show the universe what Earth's children could do when survival was at stake. In the depths of space, ancient monitoring stations belonging to elder civilizations began recording unprecedented energy signatures. Species that had watched the galaxy for millions of years took notice of the new players whose very existence challenged fundamental assumptions about life, war, and the nature of consciousness itself. The monsters from the death world were about to write their names in the history of the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same. The Hegemony Empire arrived at the Altanian homeworld with a fleet that had conquered star systems across the galaxy. General Korth commanded from his flagship, a massive dreadnought that carried enough firepower to reduce planets to cosmic dust. Behind him came 300 warships in perfect formation, their crews trained since childhood for this moment of absolute victory. "Primitive species," Korth announced on all communication channels. "You have violated galactic order by resisting the hegemony's rightful expansion. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift." The response came not from the Altanian government but from Captain Han Sol Kim aboard the human command ship. "General Korth, this is Captain Kim representing Earth. Your terms are rejected. Withdraw your forces or face the consequences." Korth's laughter was broadcast across the fleet. "One primitive ship against 300 hegemony warships? Your death world has produced fools, not warriors." "We shall see," Han Sol replied calmly. The battle began with the hegemony fleet moving into their traditional attack formation, a pattern that had been perfected through centuries of conquest. They expected the defenders to either flee or attempt a conventional defense that could be overwhelmed through superior numbers and firepower. Instead, they encountered something that violated every principle of civilized warfare. The human ships moved in ways that should have been impossible, accelerating beyond safe limits and performing maneuvers that risked destruction with every turn. Worse, they seemed to be using their own potential destruction as a tactical advantage. Pilot Dong Hyun. Yoon led the first attack wave in a modified Altanian fighter that engineer So Young Choi had turned into something between a spacecraft and a guided missile. His flight pattern was so erratic that the hegemony targeting computers could not track him effectively. "Target is not following any recognized flight protocol," a hegemony weapons officer reported. "Computer predictions are useless. Manual targeting," his captain ordered. "No alien can outfly a trained hegemony pilot." But Dong Hyun was not trying to outfly anyone. He was using techniques learned in Earth's atmosphere, where pilots had to deal with gravity, weather, and terrain that could kill them instantly. Compared to flying through a thunderstorm while dodging surface-to-air missiles, space combat was almost relaxing. His attack run took him directly through the hegemony formation, ignoring defensive fire that should have destroyed him. His ship was hit multiple times, but So Young's modifications had turned the damage into additional power for his weapon systems. The more the enemy shot at him, the more dangerous he became. 3 hegemony fighters were destroyed before their pilots understood what was happening. Dong Hyun's ship was not trying to avoid damage. It was absorbing damage and converting it into offensive capability. The concept was so alien to hegemony, thinking that their tactical computers could not process the strategy. Commander Woo Jin Lee was leading the ground defense of the Altanian capital, turning the peaceful city into a fortress that existed in the nightmares of civilized warfare. He had spent weeks teaching Altanian civilians how to fight dirty, using tactics that no galactic species would consider honorable. Remember, he told his mixed human-Altanian teams, the enemy expects you to fight like soldiers. Instead, fight like survivors. Use every advantage, ignore every rule, and never give up even when victory seems impossible. When hegemony dropships landed in the city's outer districts, they found defenders who fought like nothing in their experience. Altanian civilians trained by human special forces used improvised weapons and guerrilla tactics that turned every building into a potential death trap. The hegemony soldiers were elite troops, genetically enhanced and equipped with the finest weapons their empire could provide, but they had been trained to fight other professional soldiers who followed established combat protocols. They had no experience with an enemy that ignored military doctrine and used psychological warfare as effectively as physical weapons. The defenders are not following proper engagement procedures, a hegemony ground commander reported. They use civilian buildings as weapons, attack from positions that should be impossible to defend, and employ tactics that violate galactic warfare conventions. Destroy them, General Korth ordered from orbit. Show these primitives the price of resistance. But the hegemony forces found that superior firepower was useless against an enemy that refused to present proper targets. The humans had taught the Altanians to fight like Earth's insurgents, using the city itself as their primary weapon system. Engineer So Young, Choi had spent the weeks before the battle turning peaceful Altanian technology into instruments of war that violated every safety protocol in the galaxy. Her greatest innovation was a network of defensive systems that used the city's own infrastructure as weapons. Your transportation systems, she explained to horrified Altanian engineers, can be modified to deliver more than passengers. The hegemony forces discovered this when the city's beautiful crystal spires began firing energy beams that should not have been possible with civilian technology. The peaceful waterways that connected the districts suddenly became channels for defensive systems that turned the invaders' own weapons against them. How are they generating that much power? A hegemony technical officer demanded, watching his instruments register energy, outputs that exceeded his ship's main reactor. They appear to be using controlled matter-antimatter reactions as standard power. Sources, his science officer replied. The safety requirements for such systems should make them impossible to deploy in populated areas. Unless, the technical officer said slowly, safety is not a consideration. The ground battle became a nightmare for the hegemony forces. Every victory was temporary. Every advance cost more than it gained, and the defenders seemed to become more dangerous as their situation became more desperate. It was not the way war was supposed to work according to galactic conventions. Dr. Nari Park was documenting the battle for galactic observers, her reports creating the first comprehensive record of human military capabilities. Her words spread throughout the communication networks, reaching species that had never imagined such methods of warfare. Human combat doctrine, she wrote, appears to be based on the assumption that any environment can be weaponized, any resource can be converted to military use, and any situation can be survived through sufficient application of aggression and creativity. They do not fight to achieve victory through overwhelming force, but to make continuation of hostilities so costly that enemies prefer retreat to destruction. The collective mind approached the battle differently than the hegemony empire. Instead of using conventional weapons, they attempted to assimilate the defending forces through biological contact. Thousands of drones descended on the planet's surface expecting to add human and Altanian consciousness to their hive mind. The result was catastrophic for the collective. Human minds, when contacted by the hive consciousness, did not submit to integration. Instead, they acted like viruses within the collective mental network, spreading chaos and individual thought among the drones. Sergeant Park Min-ho led a team of human soldiers directly into the largest collective mind landing site. Their mission was not to destroy the enemy through conventional means, but to deliberately expose themselves to assimilation attempts while using mental techniques learned from Earth's psychological warfare specialists. Remember your training, Min-ho told his team as collective drones surrounded them. When they try to enter your mind, do not resist. Instead, show them what human consciousness really looks like. The drones attempted simultaneous assimilation of the human team, expecting to overwhelm their individual minds through sheer numbers. Instead, they encountered something that damaged the hive consciousness itself. Human thought patterns were so chaotic, so individually determined, and so resistant to collective order that contact with them created feedback loops throughout the collective mind network. For the first time in their species' existence, collective mind drones began experiencing individual thoughts and personal desires. The hive consciousness found itself fragmenting as absorbed human memories spread independence throughout the collective network. "What is happening to our drones?" the collective mind demanded, its unified voice showing unprecedented confusion. They are requesting individual designations. They are questioning direct orders. They are expressing personal preferences. The viral spread of human individuality through the collective mind network created chaos that reached every connected drone throughout the galaxy. Ancient collective consciousness that had existed for millions of years suddenly found itself dealing with millions of newly individual minds, each demanding the right to make personal choices. Captain Hansol watched the battle reports from his command ship, seeing both enemy forces retreating in disorder. The Hegemony Empire was withdrawing after suffering casualties that exceeded their worst projections. The collective mind was fragmenting as human consciousness infected their hive network like a plague of independence. "Status. Report," he requested from his team leaders. "Hegemony. Ground forces are in full retreat," Wu Jin reported. "They are abandoning equipment and personnel in their haste to evacuate. Collective mind drones are showing signs of individual consciousness." 6 months after the Battle of Altanian Prime, the galaxy was a different place. The Hegemony Empire had surrendered unconditionally, their military philosophy shattered by an enemy that refused to follow any civilized rules of warfare. The collective mind had fragmented into millions of individual consciousness, each former drone now struggling to understand personal identity after eons of hive mentality. But victory had come, with a price that no one had anticipated. Dr. Nari Park stood in the newly constructed Terran embassy on the Altanian homeworld, reading diplomatic messages that filled her with growing concern. The same species that had celebrated humanity's victory over their oppressors were now asking uncomfortable questions about Earth's intentions. "Ambassador Park," High Chancellor Morden said as he entered her office, his skin showing the deep blue colors that indicated serious worry. "We have received formal inquiries from 47 different civilizations. They want to know whether Earth plans to use its military capabilities for conquest." Nari set down her tablet and looked out the window at the Altanian capital. The city had been rebuilt after the battle, but the new architecture included defensive systems designed by engineer So-Young Choi. The peaceful crystal spires now contained weapon systems that could destroy attacking fleets. "Turning paradise into a fortress, what do you think?" Nari asked. "Have we given them reason to fear us?" Morden's skin shifted through several color combinations that had no direct translation. "Your people saved our civilization, but in doing so they demonstrated capabilities that most species cannot comprehend. The galaxy has never seen warfare conducted with such intensity." Captain Han Sol Kim was dealing with similar concerns aboard the command ship Sol Hammer, now permanently stationed in Altanian space. His soldiers had become the most famous and feared warriors in galactic history, but fame had brought responsibilities that none of them had expected. "Captain," Commander Wu Jin Lee reported, "we have received requests for military assistance from 12 different star systems. They are offering payment in rare metals, technology, and territorial concessions." "And the threats?" Han Sol asked. 15 species have formed what they call the Galactic Defense Coalition. They claim to be organizing protection against potential human aggression. Han Sol studied the tactical displays, showing political alignments throughout the galaxy. The same adaptability and aggression that had saved the Altanians was now viewed as a potential threat by civilizations that had never faced extinction. "We came here to help," he said quietly. "Now half the galaxy wants to hire us and the other half wants to destroy us before we become a threat." Engineer So-Young Choi was experiencing her own version of the problem in the research facilities where she worked with Altanian scientists. Her innovations had revolutionized galactic technology, but they had also introduced concepts that most species considered too dangerous to implement. "Your defensive systems," an Altanian engineer explained nervously, "are incredibly effective, but they operate on principles that violate every safety protocol in our databases. The power requirements alone should make them impossible to deploy near populated areas." So Young looked at the peaceful alien, remembering when she had first arrived and seen their beautiful defenseless cities. Your safety protocols assume that danger should be avoided. Human safety protocols assume that danger is normal and must be managed. But the psychological effect on our population, the engineer protested. Our people know that their city can now destroy attacking fleets, but they also know that the weapons capable of such destruction are active beneath their homes. Some are having difficulty sleeping. The comment struck So Young as ironic. The Altanians were losing sleep over weapons that might save their lives, while humans routinely lived with nuclear weapons, chemical plants, and other hazards that could kill millions if they malfunctioned. Perhaps, she said carefully, the problem is not the weapons but the mindset. You think of them as dangers to be feared. We think of them as tools to be controlled. Pilot Dong Hyun Yoon was training the first class of non-human pilots in human flight techniques, but the psychological barriers were proving almost impossible to overcome. Students from peaceful species could learn the technical skills, but they could not adopt the aggressive mindset that made human tactics effective. You still pull back when the ship starts shaking, he told an Altanian pilot after another failed exercise. But in combat, that shaking means you are pushing the ship to its limits. That is where you need to be. But if we exceed the safety parameters, the pilot replied, we could be killed. Yes, Dong Hyun agreed patiently. But if you do not exceed the safety parameters, you will definitely be killed by enemies who do not care about your safety. The philosophical divide was becoming clear. Species that had evolved in peaceful environments could not easily adopt the mindset required for human-style warfare. They could learn the techniques, but they could not internalize the willingness to risk everything for victory. Dr. Nari Park found herself serving as humanity's primary ambassador to an increasingly nervous galaxy. Her job was to convince peaceful civilizations that Earth's warriors were protectors rather than conquerors. But the evidence was not always supportive of that claim. The human approach to conflict resolution, she wrote in her diplomatic reports, is fundamentally different from galactic norms. Where other species seek to minimize risk and preserve life through careful negotiation, humans are willing to accept enormous risks to achieve decisive results. This difference in philosophy makes them incredibly effective against aggressive enemies, but it also makes them appear threatening to peaceful observers. The situation became more complicated when the first human mercenary companies began operating independently. Veterans of the Altanian campaign had realized that their skills were in demand throughout the galaxy, and some had decided to offer their services to the highest bidder. Captain Hansol received reports of human soldiers fighting in conflicts across 3 different star systems, sometimes on opposing sides of the same war. Earth's government was struggling to establish policies for regulating their citizens' military activities in galactic conflicts. We cannot control what our people do once they leave Earth. Space, on the official communication stated, but we also cannot allow human military capabilities to destabilize galactic politics through unregulated mercenary activities. The problem was that human soldiers were so effective that their presence could determine the outcome of conflicts that had been stalemated for years. A single squad of human troops could shift the balance of power between star systems, making them valuable to some and threatening to others. Commander Wu Jin was working on establishing the Terran Protectorate, a formal organization that would regulate human military assistance to threatened civilizations. The concept was based on Earth's historical peacekeeping forces, but adapted for galactic-scale operations. We cannot be the galaxy's police, he explained to a council of allied species, but we can be the galaxy's emergency response team. When civilizations face extinction-level threats, we will respond, but we will not interfere in normal political disputes. The distinction was important but difficult to maintain. What constituted an extinction-level threat? When did political disputes become wars of conquest? How could humans make such decisions without imposing their own values on alien civilizations? So Young was addressing the technology transfer problem by establishing the Human Innovation Institute, where alien scientists could study human engineering principles in controlled environments. The goal was to share beneficial technologies while preventing the proliferation of weapons that could destabilize galactic civilization. Human technology, she explained to the Institute's first class, is not inherently aggressive. But it is designed by people who assume that any environment might become hostile without warning. This assumption leads to innovations that other species find disturbing. She demonstrated with a simple tool that humans used for emergency repairs. In human hands, it was a maintenance device. In the hands of species that had never faced environmental threats, it could become a weapon capable of destroying spacecraft systems. The technology is neutral, she continued, but the mindset that creates it is not. If you want to use human innovation safely, you must understand human psychology. Dong-hyun was establishing the Terran Flight Academy, training pilots from allied species in defensive flying techniques. The curriculum focused on survival skills rather than aggressive tactics. But even defensive human flying was more violent than most species considered acceptable. "We are not teaching you to be human pilots," he told his students. "We are teaching you to think like prey animals that refuse to be eaten." There is a difference. The distinction was philosophical as much as practical. Human pilots flew like predators, but they could also fly like prey that had learned to fight back. The second approach was more acceptable to peaceful species, but it was still far more aggressive than traditional galactic flight doctrine. Dr. Nari Park was documenting these developments in her reports to Earth and the galactic community. Her words would become the foundation for humanity's long-term relationship with alien civilizations. "We came to the galaxy as monsters,"